Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Okay, let's get going. Yesterday I had stopped at a point where I said Plato wanted to convert the world of things, which is, which is something imperfect and therefore moving. He wanted to convert this into the perfect world that exists at the level of our thought. Uh, that is a point that I had made. Now, after I made that point, I suddenly realized that I have talked about the influences on Plato of Pythagoras. I have also talked about the influence of Parmenides and even Zeno, but I have forgotten to talk to you about one of the most important. I also talked to you about the Periclean oration, which was yet another important thing, influence on Plato. But forgive me. Um, but I had not talked to you about the Sophists and Socrates. Well, we will get to talk about Socrates anyway, and because the popular perception is that Socrates was Plato's teacher. There is yet another perception which argues that Socrates was more of a character. He might have lived, but what we know of Socrates is only through Plato. There is no other historical source that tells us who exactly and what exactly Socrates was. So whatever we know only through Plato. So quite a few people say uh, that Socrates is perhaps a mouthpiece of Plato. So all the ideas that are actually attributed to Socrates are those which are Plato's ideas. Um, I am a little, one second. I am a little skeptical about this second line of argument, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let me first talk about the sophists. Okay, so hold that idea of making the world of things also move towards perfection. Hold that idea in your head. We'll return to it soon. Okay, now the sophists derived their name because, or rather, they derived their name from that of the goddess Sophia, not to be pronounced as Sophia, it is pronounced as Sophia. And Sophia is the goddess of learning. She is the goddess of learning. So the sophists were those who worshipped Sophia and were quite knowledgeable in various things. They were very knowledgeable people, but the sophists, okay, before I get there, there's yet another point to be made. The point that is to be made are that you can treat the sophists as you can treat the sophists as proto-humanists. Okay, if you're talking about them as proto-humanists, then what we are basically saying is that they were the first humanists, though they were not humanists in the modern sense of the term, but they definitely were humanists uh, of some variety. So, what variety of humanists are they? How many of you have heard of humanism? How many of you have heard about this? And how is this different from Anyone?
It's actually about to ask, is it the same with humanitarianism? So humanism means giving more importance to humans
Oh,
rather than gods or like that.
hmm. And
And humanitarianism
humanitarianism?
is the sense of goodness of humans, showing empathy, kindness.
Okay. Uh, all right. That is a reasonable answer. The second part is absolutely okay. But the first part is where uh, you place the human being at the center of the universe. Okay. Which is nothing but giving pride of place to the human being, or to man as they called. So let me use that, to man. And so the idea is that the Sophists created a man centric universe. Okay, so when we do humanism in the context of people like Machiavelli, we'll see what humanism really is. But since this is not a full blown humanism, and this is just a proto humanism, you understand what proto humanism would mean? Okay, the word proto is prototype. Anybody who knows what a prototype is?
Example.
Sorry?
Example.
Example. No, a prototype is not an example. A prototype, let's say you're creating a product. Okay, that's a good example to start with. Let's say you want to create a cell phone. So, what will you do? You'll first draw the design, sketch. They are called design sketches. Okay. Uh, They draw design sketches, which is the external. Then you also go into the internal things, and you'll work on what parts will go into it, how much memory it'll have, and how much RAM it'll have. All those details you take, and what you do is you cobble up a working piece which is not fully developed. A better example would have come from the auto industry. You'll see, various different cars and other vehicles. They're they're camouflaged by various different kinds of covering, and they are developed, they are tested in the real world. They are camouflaged because people don't want to see what they are, what they look like. And these are usually very, what should we say, they are rough, uh, or lacking in finesse, let's put it that way. They are lacking in finesse, and each part that goes into the making of an automobile, for example, will be tested on the prototype, the suspension, the engine. Then, once they freeze on the body design, the tolerances, metallic tolerances, all those things. So that becomes a prototype. A prototype is something that is conceived of to be uh, a fully developed product or a concept. So if you attribute that prototype status to the Sophists, they are proto-humanists. They were the people who actually were the first in the world anywhere to talk about this man-centric universe. And if you look at some of the different uh, sophists, they were so convinced about the ability of the human being to do almost everything, or not just almost everything. They were completely confident of the ability of the human being to do anything and everything. And so you have some sophists who wove or weaved, if you like, but that's very bad English. Uh, WOV, wove cloth, okay? And these people then made their own clothes out of that cloth, which means they stitched or tailored their own clothes. And uh, if you look at the footwear, they also made their own footwear. They grew their own uh, plants and vegetables. They grew them. They cooked their own food. They ate the food that they cooked for themselves. And their idea was to display to the world that man can do everything that he needs for himself. Man, well, it is at that particular point, I don't know if women were involved in it, because at that time, most definitely you will see that there is a gender bias, as it is in most ancient civilizations, with the exception of the ancient Indian civilization, where there is no gender bias. But that's a topic for another day if any of you is interested. But if you go to the Vedas and all, you'll find that it is not really biased uh, in favor of men, not necessarily. Okay, and so they created a man-centric universe, saying that a man can do and create for himself all the things that he requires. So they were leading by example. So they became humanists in that sense, proto-humanists. I say proto-humanists because humanism later on went on to have greater other dimensions. Modern humanism, the humanism that came in the modern period and grew along with the modern period, that has a tendency to look at humanism in a more, or rather in a slightly different light. Though all these qualities are there, the qualities that the sophists have demonstrated, they are there, but it goes beyond that as well. But we'll talk about that when we need to, not now. So they created this man-centric universe. Now, most of the sophists were reasonable people, but somehow they decided that since they were learned and since they their learning came from their own efforts, they thought they could sell their learning for a price. Okay, it was like, you know, there was an interview once with Ratan Tata. Okay, and that was when the Indica was being made. I don't know if you people were born then. Uh, and he had outsourced, or rather, he had engaged a design house from Italy, and he had also, for the engines, he had gone to Ricardo of the UK, and people said, listen, you're saying that this is the indigenous car, the first indigenous car developed and made in India, but these are foreigners you are going to. So he said, listen, why do you want me to reinvent the wheel? Okay, why do you want me to reinvent the wheel? When the wheel is there, I'll use it. So there are people who can design a car, so they will design it. There are people who can work on the engine, make it reliable, so they will do it. And why should, just for the sake of a national pride that this is a completely indigenous thing, said it is indigenous, it is being developed only for the Indian market, for Indians, and the effort is mainly Indian. Why is it wrong to go to somebody and buy something that we require? He said, after all, we didn't. Now, you next thing you will ask me is, why are you creating a motor car that looks like a motor car? Because we are not the inventors of the motor car. Okay, so that was the point he made. So that is the kind of point that the sophists were making. They were saying, why do you want to learn things on your own? Why do you basically want to be, uh, you know, why do you want to go through the grind of learning things when you can pay me a price and I will teach you how to do it? Or if you like, I'll even do it for you. Okay, that was the sophist pitch, so to speak. Okay, so the sophists sold their learning. They actually sold their learning, and Socrates was also a devotee, a worshipper of Sophia. So technically speaking, Socrates is also a sophist, but you should not talk about him in the same breath as the sophists. Okay? Because Socrates believed oh no. Oh, wait a minute. Socrates believed that man did not know enough about the universe to claim that he was knowledgeable. And the very famous Socratic, very famous Socratic, what should I say, saying is that I know that I don't know. That's what he said. Okay? That is a truly wise man. Whereas people like me, I don't know that I don't know. So I'm an utter fool because I don't even know that I don't know. Socrates knew that he didn't know. That's what he said. Okay? The only thing I can say with certitude is that I know that I don't know. And he was actually called a gadfly. A gadfly is a fly that buzzes a lot. It goes around making a lot of buzzing sounds. And he, oh God, no. What he used to do was to argue about everything. He used to argue about everything. If you read the dialogues of Plato, if you read the Republic, the book that we are concerned with more than any other, in these you will find that um, Socrates is a central character, and you find him denouncing the other sophists, and especially if you read uh, the dialogues, it is sophists versus Socrates. Okay, so you therefore, even though he also worshipped goddess Sophia, you wouldn't put him in the ranks of the sophists because he argued with them. Okay, and the dialogues of Plato, the dialogues of Plato is to know the name of the author. Dialogues is one, and the other is Republic both use dialogue as a form of conversation. Okay, they both use dialogue as a form of conversation, and this form is the Greek dialectic. It is the Greek dialectic, which is the nature or the form of the dialogue. Okay, it is supposed to elicit a certain kind of response. Okay, it is supposed to elicit a certain kind of response out of people. And so in every question that is asked, I'm not going to go into the details of this. I've done it in detail while I talked about Zeno and his dialectical syllogisms, and also before that while talking about Parmenides. So you'll see that the dialectic is a method of questioning where you can only answer that question in A or B form. Okay, you can answer it either as A, or you can answer it or as B. So a very simple example of that is if I say, hello Akshay, how are you? Now you can't have infinite responses for this, right? You can only have uh, a very, very finite response, right? Which will be either you say, I'm fine, I'm doing okay, or you'll say, actually, I'm not doing all that well. You may want to give your reasons, may not want to give your reasons. But when I ask you, Akshay, how are you? I don't expect you to tell me that the sky is blue, okay? Or that the traffic is getting worse and worse every day. Or the metro rail is a flop. You don't expect these responses, do you? So out of every question that we ask, there is an anticipated response. Okay, and that is exemplified in the dialogue, which is about complex philosophical notions, but which expects you to react in one of two ways. And even if you react in any one of those two ways, the person who asks the question is ready with the next question. If you say A, then he has another question ready. If you say B, he has a different question ready. Ultimately, what does that lead to? In the case of Socrates, it led to the demonstration of the fact that the Sophists, who called themselves extremely knowledgeable and were selling their learning, it basically was to impress upon them that they were not knowledgeable. And what they considered knowledge, strictly speaking, was more of skills and crafts rather than the knowledge about the universe, about what the universe was. Okay, so you see, this is what you find in the dialogues. Responses till such time that you can demonstrate to Protagoras or Anaxagoras or any of these people that they are not what they think they are. Okay, that they may have some skills, but that doesn't count as knowledge. Knowledge is something else. And for Socrates, knowledge is not something you sell. Okay, knowledge is not something that you sell. That's what you'll find about Socrates. Now, that raises an interesting question about Plato. I've tried to find an answer. As yet, I have not found. That is not to say that I have researched so extensively that I can now tell you with a certainty that this is probably not a question that can be answered. I have done whatever research I could with whatever sources that I have, and I have found that there's no mention if there was a fee collected by Plato for educating people in his academy. One source seems to suggest that he was an aristocrat. He was an upper echelons, or member of the upper echelons of society, fairly uh, affluent. As a result of that, that person comes to the conclusion that uh, he probably did not collect a fee, which is quite possible. But we are only talking about a possibility, maybe a probability, but certainly not something that we know for sure. We don't know. Okay, we don't know if he actually took fees or if he didn't. Okay, actually, even I believe that knowledge should not be sold. But I'm selling my knowledge. I'm not selling it directly to you. This is an indirect process. This is a market process. My knowledge is my stupidity. I'm selling my stupidity, which makes it even worse. Okay, if you sell knowledge, at least there is some justification. I'm selling my stupidity to you and taking a huge salary in return for it. And to make up for that, I do the free classes in the evening. Okay, so that I take it as my social responsibility. Anyway, so he believed that knowledge is not something you sell. And as a hypocrite, I also believe in it. Okay. Uh, and sorry. Um, what you have to remember is he believed that knowledge is to be shared. And Plato does exactly that through his various writings. He does this exactly through his writings. Uh, he put out a number of different kinds of works, all of which are in some way or the other educative. And like I told you, uh, education is at the center of Plato's thought. Okay. And in that sense, Plato is not just a philosopher, he's also an educationist and an educator. Can you tell me what is the difference between an educationist and an educator? Anyone?
Educator is the one who gives his knowledge to others.
Mm-hmm.
He teaches.
Mm.
Educationist by himself means that he has the knowledge of something.
Uh, your second definition is absolutely right. A teacher or one who provides education is an educator. An educationist is one who believes in the importance of education, okay, and is somehow involved in the promotion of the cause of education, okay, either through charitable means or by being a part of a government setup, or as being a part of a non-governmental organization setup. If you promote education, for example, Azim Premji is an educationist. Okay, Azim Premji has set up a university. Azim Premji has also, he kind of sponsors various different NGOs that work with tribal people, take education to them. Okay, so he sponsors those. So there is this NGO called um, Ekalavya that is promoted by him. I mean, not promoted, funded by him. Okay, so he's an educationist. Premji is an educationist without doubt. And uh, Plato is an educationist and an educator. By that we mean he is a teacher, a provider of education. So, what we will do now is return back to the argument that we were doing yesterday. Of course, I suppose you know that Socrates was killed because he was made to drink um, poison, hemlock, I think it was, because he was beginning to be a nuisance to most people, mainly the Sophists. Okay, so Plato, I told you yesterday, Plato does not stop with this idea that real knowledge is knowledge that is inborn or innate, and that the world of things, okay, and that the world of things is full of imperfections. These ideas are attributable to Socrates. Okay, these are things that when Socrates was arguing with the other sophists and anyone else who cared to argue things with him, he would always say one thing, that you only know about this world which is, in which is a moving world. And so, what knowledge can you have of this? Okay, this is precisely what Immanuel Kant faced while he was writing his philosophical tracts, especially while writing his critique of pure reason, which is he found that the world was moving and it was linear, and a line, as you know, is infinite. It goes on infinitely. So he said, while you were here, the world had moved till here. So your knowledge is here, but the world is here, right? So your knowledge is not complete. And this is what he called an antinomy. Okay, an antinomy. And that is why he talks about the limits of human reason and the limits of conscious knowledge. Okay, so, but I'm jumping the gun here. Let's not go deeply into Kant now. This is not the time. So you will find that Plato is somebody who is taking recourse to the argument that real knowledge is stillness, timeless, and this knowledge can be applied to the world of objects or the world of things in which we live, which is a world of imperfection. Now, it's easy to say that. Let's apply the knowledge that we have, the knowledge that is reliable, certain. Let's apply it to the world. How do we apply it? It's not an ointment. You have you've hurt yourself here. So let's take a bit of the ointment and apply it here. You don't. That's not how it works. So the republic, the creation of the ideal republic is an explanation of how knowledge can be applied to the world and make it move this world, meaning this uh, world of objects, make it move in the direction of perfection. So there has to be, first and foremost, an enabler. Okay, so Plato talks about Demiurge. Demiurge is seen as a minor god, okay, or yeah, a minor god is what Demiurge is seen as, not a full-blown god like Zeus, Apollo, and all those. No, he's a demigod, if you want. So Demiurge makes it possible. But I would ask you to be very, very careful with the meaning of Demiurge, because Demiurge can mean three things in the Greek language. People say in Attic Greeks, the Greek that was spoken in the province of Attica, there when people use demiurge, it meant a skilled craftsman. Okay, and later on in other places, demiurge became somebody, it was used on somebody who was capable of judging right from wrong correctly. Okay, we always think we can judge right from wrong. Are we correct in our judgment is a matter of concern. A demiurge is one who can judge right from wrong correctly. Okay, and so there is this idea that a demiurge is also a magistrate. A magistrate, not in our sense of the term, who is a judge, or you go up north, here we call district collector in the southern part of the country. Up north, they call them district magistrates. Okay, so there are some kind of judicial powers there. That demiurge is not exactly magistrate in that sense of the term, because the judiciary was not really a body that existed uh, in the Greek period as we know it. So this was somebody who could distinguish between what is correct and what is not, and possibly pass a judgment. Okay, and that doesn't mean that you hold a formal office. So a magistrate is more like somebody who's capable of doing something, not somebody who's been appointed to an office. See, for example, there are some, my physician, for example, okay, he's a perfect example of a teacher. You know, I'm a pretty good quack. I know quite a bit about medicine. Most people get surprised when they see that this chap who's from political science knows so much about medicine. And the only reason, the only reason why I know so much about medicine is because of my physician. My physician is a teacher. I used to ask him questions. He used to say, "No, ask me questions, I'll give you answers." But I used to say, "Doctor, there are other people waiting outside." "No, no, no, they'll wait. You tell, you ask. I'll tell you you have a right to know." And he used to teach this draw of thing. So he was not a formal teacher. He was only a practitioner of, he's still there. He is a practitioner of medicine. But if anybody cared to learn from him, he's always willing to teach people. So most of the teachers that you find who are designated as teachers, not by that I'm going right up to professor and all those kind of things, are not teachers at all. Not teachers at all. You don't learn anything from these people. Prime example. But there are people like my doctor, Dr. N.G. Menon, from whom you can learn a lot of things. You can learn a lot of things. So he's not designated a teacher, but he's a born teacher. He was meant to teach. Okay. So magistrate is not a position that we are talking about. We are talking about somebody who has a particular ability to distinguish between right and wrong. But by the time it comes down to Plato, Demiurge becomes that particular principle, if you like, call it a principle, because you can't see Demiurge, who facilitates this transformation from the imperfection that exists in the world of things towards perfection. He facilitates this. This is what Plato says. The first thing that he's talking about. Then Plato believes that the ideal republic that he has in mind is that which is symbolic of the movement from imperfection to perfection. And in this grand scheme of things, what is really the first step that Plato takes in order to make this, convert this thing into a reality? Demiurge will facilitate, okay? No doubt about it. Demiurge will facilitate, but he's only a demigod, a minor god, not necessarily having any godly, divine characteristics. Okay, not at all having, not necessarily. Okay, in fact, if you any of you watched Supernatural, that serial, you will find that demigods are also seen as creatures of hell in Christianity. That is not that kind of a demigod. Um so demigod is somebody who can facilitate. So that's all. Let's put it there. In fact, in the case of Plato, let's say it's a principle. Now, so what does Plato, or how does Plato intend to start the transformation of the world of things from being something which is not very, uh, which is not at all perfect, it's imperfection? How do you make it move towards perfection? Unless you take the initiative, Demiurge won't be of assistance to you. So look at it this way. If you want a simile, who wrote the Mahabharata?
Yes.
No. Vedavyasa did not write the Mahabharata. Anyone who knows the answer?
He recited to Lord Ganesha and he wrote.
Yeah, correct. The actual scribe, writer is Ganesha. And the precondition that was laid down by Ganesha was that you have to basically, um, you know, uh, you have to not stop or stutter. If you stop or stutter, I'll stop writing. So that is how you have to look at Demiurge. Demiurge is like Ganesha, who will write the Mahabharata, but he's not going to decide the content of the Mahabharata. Demiurge will facilitate the transformation, but the initiation of the transformation has to come from someone. And Plato decided he will be the person to initiate the transformation. Okay? And for him, what is the most important step in this process of initiation? The most important step in this process of initiation, as far as uh, uh, Plato is concerned, is creation of a proper education system, a system of education. Would you mind this principal of PG college is calling me again and again? So can I just take the call for a minute and come back?
Yes, sir, please.
Yes, sir.
Now, for reasons best known to him, he is not taking my call. He must have thought this lowly fat fellow, if he basically doesn't take my call, why should I take his call? Okay. Uh, all right. So, the creation of a proper education system. Now, for him, the creation of a proper education system doesn't mean that you are doing what you do with your new education policy. This wonderful new education policy, Kasturi Rangan, right? Yeah. Under his stewardship, it has been created. It does not take into consideration anything called ground realities. It does not take into consideration the imperfections in society. Okay, it doesn't take into consideration any of those things. It just says we'll have it. Okay. So if you look at Plato, Plato doesn't begin his education system with some kind of schooling. Plato's education system Plato says that as soon as a child is born, okay, as soon as a child is born, that child will be taken away from its parents. It will be taken away from its parents. It won't know who its parents are. Even the parents won't know who their child is. They will be brought up as they will be brought up as the children of the police, not by their parents, but by foster parents, whose duty it is to look after them. Okay? And what does it mean that they will be brought up as the children of the police? They all they'll all be treated equally. They'll all be treated in the same way. They'll all be treated in the same way, uh, and not as children of particular parents, because they don't know whose children they are. So nobody gets any kind of preferential treatment. So now try to see the radical component. It already begins to show itself in Plato's philosophy right here. His radicalism is here, because please remember that the ancient Greek society was divided. It had lots of segmentation in society. But here, what is he saying? Irrespective of their birth, irrespective of who they were born to, that is, and where they were born, how they were born, they will all be brought up as the children of the polis. So that is the first radical element that you see. They are all given equality of status. Why? Because they are all children of the same police. That's it. So that's where it begins. The education system begins here. Now, let's get back to Pericles. What was it that Pericles said in his famous oration? He said the Athenians lost the war because most of them were unfit, physically unfit to fight a war. There were only few people who were fit, and it was entirely up to them to do whatever that fighting had to be done. So you will find Plato believing that a proper education system will have, or rather, this education system okay, he's calling me again, so just give me a minute. Good morning, sir. Good morning. Namaskaram, sir. నేను ఎవరికి చెప్తలేను సార్. ఓకే సార్. లేదు, నాకెవరు ఫోన్ చేయలేదు సార్. నాకు ఆయనకు చేస్తున్నారేమో, నాకెవరు ఏం ఫోన్ చేస్తలేరు. లేదు సార్, ఎవరికి తెలియదు. నేనైతే ఎవరికి చెప్పలేదు. నాతో ఎవరు మాట్లాడలే కూడా. ఓకే సార్. Hello.
Yes, sir.
I'm back, unfortunately. How long would you want for discussion, Madam Padma?
So last 5-10 minutes.
5-10 minutes, you can't have any. If you ask one question, I'll answer it for 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
So let me say I'll stop somewhere around 10:25.
Yes, sir.
Hmm?
Yeah.
And then, so those of you who want to have a discussion, please, and I hope there are many of you who want to have a discussion. This should not become a monologue, okay? One-way traffic. No, it should be. Okay, so, okay. This education will prioritize, this education system will first and foremost prioritize physical education. So Plato says, first they play, they are allowed to play, they meaning the children. Now this has to be understood correctly. They are allowed to play in any which way they want to. Doesn't mean that they'll, if somebody is breaking up a chair, and no, not that kind of thing. Plato realized that most of the time children, it is through their playing it is through their playing that they learn a lot of things. Okay? They learn a lot of things through play. And that is not only among human beings. You'll also see, for example, if you have dogs, if you have two dogs and you got them as puppies, they'll play. But how do they play? They play in order to hone their skills of survival. If you're fond of wildlife documentaries, like I am, if you ever see lion cubs play, they practice hunting, okay? Because they're learning how to hunt, they're honing their skills of hunting. So Plato believed that every child has an intrinsic desire to learn. Learn meaning get a stimulus to the knowledge in his head. That is what you have to remember. Learning is not, again, experiential learning. No, it's not experiential learning, not learning that you get through experience. But what he says is people play because they have something in their head and they play in a way which activates that learning in the head. So, as long as they are not being too destructive, he would say, let them play freely. Let them play freely. That's where all the learning component comes out. I'm saying comes out. I'm not saying it begins. Okay. The learning component comes out because you're sending stimuli to the brain to activate the structures of knowledge that are there in each brain. Okay, because knowledge is innate or inborn. We are not born with an empty mind, we are born with knowledge in our mind. But that needs, like Noam Chomsky said, you have structures of language in your head, but you need to hear a language in order to activate that structures of language. If you don't hear it, which is the stimulus, then that structures remain dormant in the mind. So that is exactly the kind of argument that Plato is giving. Okay, some people say he said let them play till 6 years. I didn't find any evidence of his talking about that till 6 years let them play. I didn't find evidence of that. Okay, and he will therefore say let them be free, give them freedom, let them learn to play and play in any possible manner that they actually are capable of. Okay, that is basically what uh, you will find being said by Plato. Don't interfere with their playing. As they get older and we don't know the age, then he would say they should be first initiated they should be initiated into gymnastics. Okay, who is familiar with gymnastics? Nobody is familiar with gymnastics? Hmm? Okay, we were supposed to have had Olympics last year and they got postponed to this year, but it looks like they are now not going to be held in. But gymnastics, nobody has seen gymnastics.
It seems,
So
I
what
thought you
is,
were asking if we were practicing it.
no, what is gymnastics?
Jumping, jumping from very high.
No, that is not. There are various. See, gymnastics is a form of physical exercise, actually. In fact, even in Olympics, they are called each of these different kind of things that are there. And the Olympics, by the way, were something that was introduced by the Greeks. Okay, and they were held near the Mount Olympus, Olympus. So Olympus was where these games were held. And during the Greek period, the only events that were held were gymnastics and athletics. Gymnastics and athletics are the ones that you see which were held by the Greeks. So, what is gymnastics? Gymnastics is a certain way of exercising. Okay. And in order to be a good gymnast, you must have a very flexible body. Okay. You should have a very flexible body. And you should have things like a great sense of balance. You should have great strength in the upper body. And therefore, you see, if you look at gymnastics meant for men, they are different from gymnastics meant for women. Okay, like for example, the one of the exercises which is called the Roman rings. I don't know why it got the name Roman rings. Okay, that only men do. The Roman rings is something that only the men do. And then there is the beam. Okay, there is a beam on which girls perform exercises. They flip back without losing balance, without falling off a beam that is just this thick. Okay, and men do only what is called a crossbar, and women do a double crossbar. Okay, which is there's one bar which is high and one bar which is low. Whereas men do only the high bar, the women do both. Then floor exercises are common for both men and women. Okay, that's where they do the flip flops. Okay, that's where they pull their leg and touch their head. You know, all those things that are visible to us when you look at floor exercises. Okay, uh, these also got into other sports like ice skating, figure skating as it's called, which is the equivalent of gymnastics. Okay, and so a gymnasium is a place where you do these exercises. That's how everybody says, I go to the gym. My foot, you go to the gym. Nobody lifted weights and all that kind. No, these gyms are not gyms. Okay. Uh, so I remember once my friend took me there. There's this thin, scrawny fellow who started he picked up probably 2 pounds of dumbbells, did it thrice, and then stood in the front of the mirror and was trying to see if the muscle got built. Not that kind of gymnastics, please. So, gymnastics is supple body. When people are young, their bodies are supple. So, at a young age, get them to learn gymnastics. That is where the learning begins. Okay, that's where the learning begins, with gymnastics. And the next is athletics, which are track and field events. Okay, which are again more in the nature of exercise, building up of strength, building up of muscle mass. So if you look at that, you see Plato believed in holistic education. Oh, what did I do? Jesus. Sorry. Sorry about that. So he believed in holistic education, not Sri Chaitanya techno school. As soon as you're born, even we start our education of our children as soon as they are born. They they decide the elder son will become an engineer and the younger son or daughter will become a doctor, and they are sent to Chaitanya, Narayana. Okay, people go there and they are made to mug things up. They don't know anything of anything. So I'll stop here. He believed in holistic education, and so it's open for discussion. Madam Rachna, you
Yes, sir.
start. You have questions. Start. Arguments, questions. Start.
Okay. I thought that gymnastic is jumping from heights.
No,
No.
gymnastic is not jumping from heights, madam. There is also a thing called a vaulting horse, uh, which is nothing but a cross beam. But it is again only the women who do that. Gymnastics is a lot of things. You have vaulting horse, you have the crossbar, floor exercises, then you have the um, beam, and you have the parallel bars, and you have floor exercises. So there are all these things. So gymnastics is not just, and it's an amazing thing to watch what the gymnasts do. You know, uh, even in the days when I was thin, I was very thin at one time. Nobody believes it anymore, except those who saw me at that time. Uh, and if you basically look at what happened when I first saw gymnastics, I thought, is the human body capable of these things? Is it seriously capable of doing these things? They defy our idea of what the human body can do. Hmm? So gymnastics is not just jumping. Jumping and all comes from athletics. High jump, if you're talking about high jump, pole vault, uh, shot put, and a hammer throw, and javelin, and what else? All the track events, 100 meters dash, 200 meters dash, all these are uh, athletics. Athletics are outdoor. Please remember that. Mostly they are outdoor. Nowadays they are having them in indoor stadia as well. I don't know why. But athletics as such are outdoor, and the gymnastics are necessarily indoor. Gymnastics are not done outside. That's why I have a gymnasium specifically for that. Yeah. What, Madam Padma? You're not saying anything.
Yes, sir. I was just waiting for you to stop.
I stopped.
Yeah. So yesterday we were talking about Plato's ideas in reality, right, sir?
Hmm.
So I just have this. It's not a doubt. It's just I just wanted to say if it is correct or not. So there was something Plato and Aristotle do not agree on this ideas. So, for example, I read it somewhere. To Plato, it was, for example, it was the idea and not the object itself, which was the reality.
Yeah.
For example, take an animal or dog. It was the idea of that dog or horse, which is a reality, and not the animal itself, because it may die, but the idea will not die. But what Aristotle says is for him it was the horse and not the idea of the horse which was the reality, because the horse can be seen, it can be known,
Yeah.
etc. So what is this difference of their opinions?
Well, the difference of opinion between Plato and Aristotle is a very large difference. Okay, but one also has to understand that the way in which that these differences are posited today, especially by not too well educated writers of books, okay, is that they project Aristotle as a materialist. Okay, going by the same example of the horse, that the real horse is the object horse, right?
Right.
It's a living object, but it is. So that is what he says is the real horse. Yes, to that extent, there is no doubt. It's not like the idea of the horse. And Aristotle's basic disagreement is on this whole concept of perfection. Okay, he does not agree with the definition of definition of uh, what should I say? Uh, does not have the does not have materialism in him at all, because Materialism is something that is of a more of a modern thing. It has something to do with John Locke's tabula rasa kind of thing. Okay, which is, you know, you have no uh, matter in your, nothing is there in your brain when you're born. Your mind is completely empty. And it is through the process, two processes, one which he calls sense perception, and the other which he calls cognition. Through the senses, you internalize the external world. Internalize
Right.
meaning you send data to the brain, and uh, cognition is the process which makes the brain understand uh, the different inputs that are coming into the brain at the same time. Please remember, it's not one sense at a time that works, right? All the
Right.
senses are working at the same time, and they are sending in data into your head. So, how does the brain make sense of these? How does it make sense of these? It makes sense of these by taking recourse to, um, what should I say? It makes sense of this by taking recourse to cognition. Cognition is the ability to collate all the things that you're getting together separately. They continue. Like, for example, I always give this thing, which is you sit in a theater, you're watching a film, and you're watching a film. So your eyes are sending information. You're hearing the soundtrack that is sending information. And you might have bought yourself some popcorn. So that is sending some information. Two informations. One is taste and the other is smell. Okay. And your hand is touching. Like somebody said, nobody knows in a theater who's who has the right over the handrest, right? But you are touching something. So all these data, they're all going in. You're able to enjoy the taste of popcorn. You're able to enjoy the dialogues that you're hearing or the soundtrack that you're hearing. You're able to enjoy, if it's good photography that is there in the film, then you're able to enjoy that as well. So it is that kind of thing is the materialism that people talk about today. Okay, and Marx gave it also another twist, but Aristotle is not any of these. So while it is true that he differed with Plato on many things, he too agrees that there are some things that we know a priori. Okay, this is
Sir,
1 second. A priori, which is you can know things through reasoning before something happens.
Right.
So he's not ruling that out. So if you read the prior and posterior analytics, he talks about reasoning, which is a priori, where you can anticipate what will happen, and a posteriori, which is after something happens. So he has both those in the mind. He has them. So he doesn't rule out the mind. and he's a teleological thinker, which I'll explain to you later. And the telos is something which we don't set for ourselves. Okay, but yet we are aware of the telos. So he also does talk about things which are innate, inborn. It's not like he
Right.
doesn't. Okay. Yes, Sunil,
Okay.
you were saying something.
సార్ ప్లేటో అకాడమీని స్థాపించింది కదా సార్.
Huh?
ప్లేటో అకాడమీ అనే సంస్థను స్థాపించి
Huh.
రిపబ్లిక్ అనే గ్రంథంలో తత్వవేత్తలు పాలకులు కావాలని చెప్పింది కదా సార్.
అట్లా చెప్పలేదండి. అకాడమీ అనేది స్థాపించడం అంటే గ్రీక్ భాషలో అకాడమీ అంటే స్కూల్.
ఓకే.
స్కూల్ అది. తత్వవేత్తలు అనలేదు ఆయన. ఆయన ఏమన్నాడు, ఫిలాసఫర్ కింగ్ అది ఒక వ్యక్తి కాదు, ఒక మొత్తము ఒక గ్రూప్. ఆ గ్రూప్ తత్వవేత్తలు కాదు, వాళ్ళు ఏంటి అంటే వాళ్ళకి ఒక పుట్టుకతో ఎవరికైతే నాలెడ్జ్ అనేది ఉంటుందో వాళ్ళ బ్రెయిన్లో, ఆ నాలెడ్జ్ని వాళ్ళు గుర్తు తెచ్చుకోగలరు. సో తత్వవేత్తలు ఎవరు అంటే ఎవరికైతే నేను రెల్మ్ ఆఫ్ ఫార్మ్స్ గురించి మాట్లాడాను, అందులో వాళ్ళు నేర్చుకున్నది ఇక్కడ రికలెక్ట్ చేసుకోగలిగే వాళ్ళు ఫిలాసఫర్ కింగ్స్ అవుతారు వాళ్ళు. ఓకే, అది ఫిలాసఫర్ కింగ్ అనేది ఇట్ ఈస్ అ మెటఫర్. అంటే మెటఫర్ని తెలుగులో ఏమంటారో నాకు తెలియదు. అది తత్వవేత్తలు కాదు, తత్వవేత్తలు కాదు.
అరిస్టాటిల్ ప్రభుత్వాలను 6 రకాలుగా వర్గీకరించి ప్రజాస్వామ్యము మంచిది కాదు, పాలిటీ బెస్ట్ అని చెప్తారు కదా సార్. ఎందుకు సార్ అట్లా చెప్పిండు?
అదే అరిస్టాటిల్ చెప్పినప్పుడు చెప్తాను. ఇంకా మనం ప్లేటోలోనే ఉన్నాం కదా.
ఓకే,
అది చెప్తాను మీకు. అది చాలా ఇంపార్టెంట్ పాయింట్, నేను చెప్తాను. ఓకే
ఓకే
ఓకే ఓకే. I think you should go to Yasmin's class. It's 10:44.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for today's
Right.
class.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
No problem, Akshay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.